Welcome to the Online Business Launchpad podcast. I'm your host, Trudy Rankin, and today I'm talking with Justin Chen, who is also interested in good information about customers and potential customers. Now, Justin is the co-founder of PickFu. I thought that was a kind of an interesting name, but it's a consumer research platform that companies use to get fast and reliable feedback from real people. Because you all know when you make up your avatars and things like that, sometimes it feels like you're making up fake information about fake people, and it's just very strange. But with PickFu, the people who use their services, reliable feedback from real people, they can use this to help them make better data-driven decisions about their products. Now, Justin is what I would call an eternal student in some respects. He's got a Bachelor of Science in Electrical Engineering and Computer Science, and he also has a Master's in Engineering Management, which I find fascinating. Now, he is a bit of a serial entrepreneur, which sort of speaks to my heart. He's been around in this space for a long time. And he has a family, which always makes life interesting when you're an entrepreneur. So Justin, welcome and thanks for being on the podcast.
Thanks for that intro, Trudy.
So just for our listeners' sake, just tell us a little bit about your background, how you got involved with what you're doing, and then we'll get into what you're doing.
Sure. It came about serendipitously. So my co-founder and I got into entrepreneurship, I want to say 17 years ago, 18 years ago, something like that. We had gone to college together at Berkeley, both doing computer science. We graduated during the dot-com bust. So we went our corporate ways. I went to Hewlett-Packard, he went to Microsoft, like as corporate as possible. But after a few years, we got tired of that and we knew that we wanted to do something on our own. So we got together, we decided to quit and start something. And we didn't really care what it was. It could be a restaurant, it could be a bar, it could be a website, whatever it is. But being computer science majors, we're like, we should probably do something that we know what we're doing. We decided to start a website and we self-funded a restaurant review menu aggregator called Menuism back in 2006. And so we threw our hat into the highly competitive local restaurant listing space in the US that's dominated by Yelp and City Search and TripAdvisor. And we carved out our own niche of organic Google traffic and ad monetization. Along the way, we were working on a redesign for that, and we could not decide on what redesign to use. And being entrepreneurs, we had already used up all of our points with our friends and family, asking them all these questions. And in the beginning, they humor you. And then they just say, oh, that's whatever, stop bothering me. And it just stops becoming useful. Lean validation was the trend back then. And it was all about getting out of the office, going to a coffee shop, talking to people. Then being engineers and introverts, we didn't want to do that. So we wanted to build a digital solution to do a digital focus group. So that's where PickFu was born, out of a very self-serving need. And so we built that as a side project. We threw it up on the internet, threw a PayPal button on it at the time, and we just left it there for years. And other entrepreneurs used it. They use it for idea validation, all that kind of stuff. That's the genesis of it. And eventually it grew into our full-time thing. We pivoted our attention away from our other projects. And so that's how it started. We had no intention of getting into the space, but we saw a need, and then we saw the market kind of validate over and over that there were other people who had this kind of problem.
I think it's fascinating. I'm smiling to myself because I've been through that whole cycle of going, oh, what do you mean I have to go do customer research?
Yeah.
What do you mean I have to go talk to real people? Now, I actually enjoy talking to people.
Sure.
I really do. But it's the reaching out and going to people that you might not know very well. Tell me all about yourself.
Yeah.
And the reaction that you get sometimes when people are, who are you? So it's interesting. I'm just curious. With your Menuism, that was the one you had before. It sounds quite a lot like it was just a like not passive, but an income sort of content-based sort of site.
Yes,
so
correct.
what have you done with it? Did you sell it? Are you keeping on running it? What's happened with that?
It's still running. We decided to keep running it. Over the years, we had a lot of conversation opportunities to potentially sell it. We did the calculus and we decided that we'd like to ride it out as long as we could. And I think it's been a good decision. It's still continuing to be passively income. And honestly, it's what allowed us to grow PickFu all these years, and totally grateful for that first one. And of course, you learn all the things that will go into the next venture. So it's a little sacred. You hold a special piece of it in your heart.
Yes, that's the interesting part. A lot of people choose not to sell something that they've worked on for a very long time. And some people don't have a problem letting go. And for some people, it's like, why would I sell? This thing's still making me money.
Exactly.
So I'm a little bit curious about just that whole space. And I do think it's an interesting space where we are turning to and speaking to real people to get feedback about
Mhm.
specific types of things. And you said you came onto this idea through a need that you and your business partner have, your
Mhm.
co-founder have. How long did it take you to realize that this thing was actually going to be something that could turn into a fairly substantial piece of work that's going to be
Yeah,
something you want to focus on?
that's a really interesting question. I think we had a hunch that we were onto something because the customer feedback that we would get was so warming and positive. You helped me with this important decision in my life, like this data, whatever, it steered me to the right direction. That's all great. You can't pay the bills with that. I think the difficult thing in the beginning was finding the right customer. And so in the beginning, we thought it was going to be other entrepreneurs like ourselves. They are trying to save money and it was a low cost thing. Turns out there's not a lot of money in that. We're all cheap, that we don't have a ton to spend. And we had a really low price point at the time. And as we evolved the product, we just saw how customers were coming and using it as it found its way through different industries. The first one I think that showed some market viability was self-publishing authors. People testing book titles, book covers, they don't have the benefit of an editor or a big publishing house to give them the advice. Here's what you should call it, and here's the book cover design. And everyone was just throwing stuff out there. But Tim Ferriss had popularized testing your book titles with the 4-Hour Workweek. He talked about how he used ads to test out which title turned into the 4-Hour Workweek. And so there was a lot of interest in data-driven decisions around book titles. So that was our first serious market that we were marketing into because we did see a very compelling use case for our customer base. It wasn't hard to sell it to them. We were able to get a lot of affiliates to sign up and talk about it. But still, that wasn't a great customer necessarily because the frequency that you publish books and the number of tests that you would run still isn't that interesting. As it meandered through different industries, we found game developers, so mobile game developers started using it, which was interesting, but much more enterprise. And then eventually we stumbled upon e-commerce. So people selling on Amazon or eBay, kind of these marketplaces where what's been interesting over the past few years is that whole space has been democratized so that anyone can hop onto a platform, anyone can source product from anywhere in the world and fulfill it through Amazon or whatever it is. And so this opened up a huge space where people were investing a lot of money and time into products, and they needed ways to validate decisions, whether it's product sourcing ideas or design or packaging or branding, or more importantly, their main image that shows up on Amazon. So once we were discovered in this space and realized what was happening, we leaned really hard into this e-commerce space. It's a space that we market heavily into. So that's when we really started doubling down on the team, the growth and everything to try to capitalize on the opportunity.
I think that's really interesting because the need to validate products and things has been around for absolutely forever. I've never
Yeah.
said this on the podcast before, but once a long time ago in another world, in another universe, when my children were very small, I used to transcribe the sessions that people would have, the product sessions
Mm.
where they'd get a group of people together and
Mhm.
ask a whole bunch of questions about the particular product. And I can just remember doing one about toilet paper and thinking, there has to be a better way. And it sounds like what you've put together is definitely a better way of getting questions answered about particular products. That's really interesting that the e-commerce side of things has popped up to the top. But I can see why there would be lots of one-off things. As you said, the gaming side, especially in the self-publishing industry, is quite large. Do you think, just based on what you're looking around the world and what's happening, there are more emerging type of industries or opportunities for what you do?
I think there's obviously opportunity in almost every single industry. I think we're trying to find a methodical way to attack it. The global aspect of everything is super interesting to us. Only about half of our business is actually US, despite being a US based business. And it makes sense in retrospect because when we started, it was focused on a US based pool of respondents. And so while that's useful to US businesses, it's even more useful to non-US businesses. So if you're a Chinese e-commerce seller or a game manufacturer or someone from Europe or Ukraine or something like that, and you're selling it to the US market, that kind of feedback is invaluable, whether you're figuring out your product design or messaging, wording, all that kind of stuff. You really need to make sure it resonates. So I think that was really interesting to us and has really expanded our perspective and outlook on growing the business. We have a fully remote team of about 20, totally geographically dispersed from Kazakhstan to LATAM to Europe to Taiwan, everywhere. We purposely want to make sure that diversity of opinion is instilled into the DNA of our company. And so that keeps our mind open to different customer opportunities. And we've since opened up pools of respondents in Canada, Australia, UK, Germany, with a couple other countries coming down the line. And the opportunities in each industry are the same. So whether it's e-commerce, there are, of course, e-commerce sellers in every single country. Their needs are slightly different and whatnot. So I think it's been really interesting opening up access to each different local market, even though it may be the same, similar use cases, right? Just today, I was looking at a German publisher testing book titles in German to the German audience. It's very interesting how the world has opened up with all these tools and the open access to all these information that now we even have people in different countries, whether they're Chinese sellers testing against German buyers. Oh, is this a product that you would be interested in?
It's fascinating because I'm just thinking about the whole way the model works. And so on one hand, you have people who want to use the service and to get answers about what do people like and things like that. And on the other side, you've got to find people who are going to give the answers. And so you've got to provide a two-sided platform. What are some of the challenges in running a model like that?
So the way that we tackle it is actually we partner heavily on the supply side of things. So where we get the pool of people, we tap into the same enterprise market research pools that a Procter & Gamble might use to do a longer form study. But what we do is tap into those things programmatically, and then we build our own layer of demographic targeting and data quality on top of it. Because the way that we look at our customers, we expect zero market research experience whereas when these pools are typically used by people, they're market research consultants, consumer insights teams, and large organizations. They know how to ask the questions, filter the data, they analyze it. We expect none of that from our customers, and we try to do all of that within the platform. And that's how we're differentiating from some of the more powerful tools, but we're trying to 80-20 it down to everyone else where, okay, I don't need the complexity of some of the surveys that they might be running at a Procter & Gamble, but I just need to validate this or just get some open-ended feedback on this. And we do that in an easy, simple, and high quality manner.
That's interesting because what you said makes sense at this level. And then you think about all of the work and the detail that you have to put into being able to make it that simple. It's really fascinating. It's not
a challenge.
it's a challenge. It really is. Simplifying things is a challenge. I'm a little curious in terms of, because AI is the rage at the moment, AI this and AI that, and it's going to do everything for everybody. In terms of what you do in your model, are there ways that you could see that AI could assist? And are there ways that you can see where it would just absolutely mess things up?
So we've obviously thought deeply about AI. So I guess the first aspect is we're definitely incorporating AI into our product. First of all, we already have things like AI summarization and sentiment analysis, even the ChatGPT style, ask your poll results anything. We sync up all the results and you could ask it to find trends in the open-ended responses or maybe rewrite something based off the feedback. So a lot of interesting things you can do when you turn AI into a research assistant on top of your polls. And we have other interesting ideas of incorporating AI that way. I think there's definitely a danger of assuming that AI and personification is going to be enough for people. I think that's what people maybe tend to want to do. But I think anyone who follows AI closely knows that it's prone to a lot of errors, hallucinations, and all these kinds of things. I definitely caution people to just think that you could tell AI to be your avatar and then it's going to answer all the questions for you. The way that we advise is that at the end of the day, a real human is going to buy your product, react to your marketing. And so while you could use AI to do content generation, and a lot of us are doing that to break the bottleneck of manpower, you still want to test it against actual humans, because at the end of the day, it does need to resonate with actual humans. And you don't want AI spitting out whatever it thinks it should be and being tone deaf to your target audience. So we try to advocate people to pair AI content generation or assisted content generation, actual human feedback. And then we add AI onto that to help analyze it.
I'm smiling because I did exactly that. We did it as a test. We played with AI just to see if we could get it to help us pull together a summary of an avatar. Like I said, made up, but based on a real person, but still made up as an avatar. And
Yeah.
then, and that turned out okay. But
Yeah.
then we asked it to write website copy.
Uh-huh.
It's just, no, I don't think so. It sounds terrible. Anyway, it's really fascinating. It's not terrible because of the words that have been spat out. It's terrible because the tone and the voice fit a particular type of person and approach, which on reflection makes sense to me, but on
Yeah.
reflection, it does not fit our customers.
Yeah.
So it's just been an interesting journey. I want to come back and circle around a little bit just to something that you were talking about just a little bit at the beginning, or you just mentioned it in the past, and that is that you have a co-founder.
Hmm.
And you've been working with this co-founder for quite a long time. Obviously, you started out separately. You got to the place where you both went, we need to start something together.
Yeah.
And now you're still working together. Is that correct? So I'm always interested in businesses that have been co-founded or in collaborations where you've got more than one person working on something and you sharing the benefits and the pains of doing that. I've got several questions about this, but I guess I'll start by asking, in terms of your skills and abilities, do they tend to be different? Do you have complementary skills, or do you tend to have the same sorts of skills and you fill in the gaps with other team members?
This has always been interesting because when they talk about pairing co-founders or when you're doing co-founder dating, or they always talk about probably finding complementary, which means different skills. But we had the same skill set, I would suppose. We both did computer science at the same school, both thinking of it like very rational and not as creative way of thinking. I think we might complement each other more personality wise, perhaps. I think our personalities are a little bit different. Surprisingly, I think it's always worked out well that while we both have the same skills and interests, I think the work has divided pretty well. Like there's always something that either I want to take or my co-founder wants to take, and there's never been like, oh, I wish I could do that, and bickering over that. So I think we've found a way to harmonize in that way. I think we're typically on the same page. So if one of us is out and the other one's in, it's nothing misses a beat. I think as far as the team goes, yeah, I think we try to find people who are the opposite brains in terms of like creativity and good at writing. We're both engineers, not great writers. So that kind of stuff, making sure that the team is balanced and we're not writing marketing copy for the website or anything like that.
Actually, that's fascinating. How long did it take you to get to the place where you realized that was probably something you shouldn't do and you got somebody else to do it?
Pretty early. I think we both knew that we weren't writers. We always had someone that was, at least in the beginning, a marketing contractor, and then eventually we were hiring a full marketing team.
You said that you've got team members from all over the place. Did you find it a challenge at the beginning to find the right people, get right skill sets?
Yeah, definitely. We knew from the beginning we wanted to do fully remote from when we started to scale. The two of us have actually never been in the same city. Despite going to college together, we went apart, and then we've just never been able to hone in the same place. I'm in LA, he's up in the San Francisco Bay Area. So we knew we wanted to go fully remote. And so it's definitely been a challenge to find the very right personalities that I think work well in a remote environment. There has to be a really open mind, especially when you're going for diversity, because I think you want everyone to treat each other the same. And then there's a lot of challenges with asynchronousness and time zone overlap and all that kind of stuff, which is a challenge that we have that other people who obviously work in the same place don't have. Like I said before, I think the diversity of viewpoints and the different cultural aspects that people bring is such a huge asset to us. And then just like time zone coverage, and then just other customer and like local exposure. Even when we talk to team members, someone's in Peru, and I saw this thing that only someone local in Peru would see. And obviously we wouldn't have any exposure to it, but it's super interesting and a possible lead for a market that we might pursue.
That's really helpful because that local sense of what's what on the ground can make all the difference. Definitely. Just one more quick question about working with a co-founder.
Sure.
Inevitably, there will be times when you're going to end up disagreeing about something. How do you handle your differences and the times when you don't agree?
There's healthy debate. Part of the reason we built PickFu actually was so that we could PickFu it. So on our original copy, which was not marketing vetted, one of the selling points was settling bar bets. And so we would use PickFu all the time for settling disputes between ourselves, more inconsequential ones, but still the same. And we still use that internally too, when we're debating like a UX change or a value proposition messaging, something like that. And we're debating a little bit, let's just go PickFu it and toss it up. And it's always interesting, even if they aren't our target market. A lot of times it comes down to common sense and people responding, I don't know why you would put it that way. This doesn't make any sense. And then it just takes the blinders off and you realize, oh, okay, like I see that other point of view now that a bunch of strangers have articulated it. Luckily, there hasn't been any major decisions that we've had fractious debate over, but I think we're both pretty logical, I think, in our reasoning. If we can out reason each other, then that's typically the decision we'll go with.
Well, it's fortunate in that respect. It doesn't always work out that way. So you use your own system, PickFu, to help with making some of the decisions.
Yeah.
What about sort of future-facing decisions like vision for the future, or
Yeah.
you may be thinking about ways you could scale or other ideas that you might want to take and do something with? How do you deal with those?
We're voracious learners, I think, in terms of business growth, startup best practices. We love consuming that type of content. We have a couple of team members who are also really into that. And so there's always a lot of interesting debate and conversation around strategic decisions and what direction we want to go in. Obviously, that's not something we're going to pick. And even a lot of those decisions are hard to ask of your customer, right? I think Jobs famously talked about how you couldn't ask anyone that, and they wouldn't tell you that they needed an iPhone, right? And so those kinds of decisions do need to come from some kind of product vision. And so I think what's been helpful for us is being in this space now for so long, even passively and then actively, has allowed us to have a lot of customer and product knowledge that we felt fairly confident about the direction that we're going in and where the market is going. So we do have a strategic roadmap that is set by all of that experience, coupled with the diverse opinions of our team.
It's always an interesting question because people make these decisions in so many different ways, and it comes down to so many different variables. I want to circle right back to the very beginning once more, back to when you were both working in separate corporate organizations. What was it about each of your situations that made you go, we got to do something different?
I think it was the lack of growing opportunity. I think the work was fine, and I think we both performed well in our jobs, but a few years out of college and you have that itch for, I don't know, action, knowledge, or something, right? And I think we just weren't feeling fulfilled by it. We had talked about doing things in college together. Like we had a project team where we were playing with ideas and all that kind of stuff. But of course, everyone goes their separate ways. And it's really hard to restart that conversation when everyone's starting to settle in. They're making money from the real job. No one wants to quit that opportunity. I think it was just that itchiness of wanting to better ourselves. And the way we looked at it, we calculated that if we quit, obviously we wouldn't have a salary, we would incur some cost. And if we gave it 1 to 2 years and lost a bunch of money, then we would chalk it up to the cost of going to get an MBA. And we could probably just crawl back to our jobs, corporate jobs, with some kind of experience, right? Some kind of real life experience. And so that was the downside. And it didn't seem bad. So it seemed worthwhile. After 4 or 5 years of working, we had saved up enough money to cushion that 2 years of experimentation.
Did you have family at that stage?
No family. I was engaged. And the other thing was we had unfortunately bought houses at the time, which really increased the burn, which was a poor decision in hindsight. The biggest cost for us was just mortgage payments. And so that was quite a fire underneath us. We had to get the profitability very quickly. But luckily, no kids at the time, not really tied down with family stuff. So I could see it being much more difficult for someone. We both have 2 kids now, and it would be hard to imagine starting something at that stage, especially with no income coming in.
I know a fair few people who end up working part-time and work on their
Yeah,
business
that makes
part-time. But it's just interesting to me because every new business startup, different run rates, different runways in terms of how long it takes to get to profitability. Did you bootstrap or did you get investors in?
Fully self-funded, no friends and family rounds or anything. So we just used our own savings. And then at a certain point, I would say maybe a year into it, we had to do a little bit of consulting just for cash flow.
Yeah.
But then things started turning around on the revenue side, and then we were able to stop the consulting. So it was good having that as a fallback.
That's often something that happens. I was talking to somebody just recently and they were going, I have to do some other work to try and make this business work because I got to have the money coming in,
Yeah.
and they felt like they were a failure. No, that's not a failure. That's actually success,
Yeah.
because you don't have to go back to work full time. You can do
Yeah.
consulting part time. You can work on your business part time. That is a very positive step forward. It's been really interesting hearing about your journey to where you have a business that's very useful to people. People are using it. They like it. And you've got a pathway towards scaling for the future and things like that. If somebody was in the same sort of situation as you were working on your original business, and you're going, hang on, wait a minute, there's this thing burbling around in the background. Should we focus on that? What kind of advice would you give people who are going, oh, this or this?
I don't know if we knew enough or if it would have been the right decision back then, or like years before we pivoted to at that time, because I don't think we had the market validation that we found a customer persona that would support the business. So I do think there's benefit to the self-funded approach where you do have time to let things marinate. And it's not that we weren't working on it. We were on it quite a bit along the way. And it was a lot of incorporating customer feedback and really fine-tuning it to the point where it is the product that eventually resonated. And I don't think we could have foresaw what that product was going to be or the evolution of it. And it was just through a lot of customer feedback. Obviously, we talked to customers, we emailed with to try to guide us towards a product that really resonated with them. And I do think that 8 years or so of marination was critical to gaining all the product knowledge that we needed to be confident about that strategic roadmap that we're on now. Maybe if we had come from a different background or something into the space, it could have been different. But at the same time, I do think the outsider perspective disrupting a space has been valuable, because now that we're more in this market research space, but not really, as we talk to people in the space, and I imagine if we were in those shoes, I don't know if we would have decided to come up with whatever we came up with now that works. And I don't think I would advise anyone different. I would say to have patience. And if you have positive customer feedback, which we always did, eventually the positive customers will lead to good word of mouth, which was always our biggest driver of business and continues to be our biggest driver is positive word of mouth, that eventually find the right customer avatar that could support the business. And it's hard to push that too hard sometimes, because you can't really push word of mouth. People talk about it when they want to talk about it. Be patient.
Yeah, I think that's really good advice. And I've spoken to a few founders of SaaS, software as a service products.
Yeah.
And the ones that are successful are the ones who've taken that whole listen to the customer, pivot, modify, optimize according to what the customers say they want and need. And those are the ones who succeed and stick around for the long term. One more really quick question before we finish up. And it comes back to that pivot point between Menuism and PickFu. Did you have a very specific, deliberate set of criteria that when you met those criteria, you knew you were going to move towards PickFu and just let the other one sit on a little bit? Or did you just wake up one day and go, oh, this one's doing really good, maybe we should focus on that?
I don't think we had preset decision criteria. I think we had almost resigned to that it was going to be part of the portfolio of businesses that we had at the time, and it was fine, and we would continue to grow it in organic fashion. I think the pivot point was definitely, we had got mentioned on a large e-commerce podcast. And so we started seeing an influx of e-commerce customers that were using the product in a fundamentally different way than we had ever seen, and at a different kind of pattern, like usage pattern, frequency. And I think it was a lot of thought and research into that space, and then realizing the market opportunity of what we could do, and then making the conscious decision that, okay, if we want to give this a chance, then now is the time to give it a chance. And then we actually had to switch gears, growing it as a, I don't want to say lifestyle business, because I think people use that in a like derogatory way, but like we were building in a way to be more conservative in expense and also growth. And we wanted to flip it on its head and say, okay, we're not going to take that approach anymore. We're actually going to invest heavily into people and growth. And we're going to try to pour as much profit into that kind of growth. And so that was a very deliberate switch. And that changes the type of people that you hire and how you hire them. And I think there's a lot that changes in like the culture you're trying to grow. I think it goes from a founder with a lot of contractors to we're building a team here. We want ownership. We want people to be able to work independently. And it's like a true company that where you're trying to build an organization as opposed to just a lot of people doing stuff task-wise. That was a big decision. And that was from evaluating and seeing the market opportunity.
So just a curious question, follow-up question, and that is, as you made that switch, two questions. How long did it take to make that switch? And what kind of skill sets did you have to start to learn in order to be able to do that successfully?
The switch probably took a while because I think we were seeing that we had to change like who the types of people that we were hiring as we were trying to operate at a new pace with the same people from before. And then there's seeing that there was like a mismatch in skills or interest or whatever. There's like a misalignment, right? If you hire someone for a typical expectation and they're like, hey, no, now we're going like 200%. So it took probably the better part of a year to realize that and make the appropriate personnel changes. Definitely a lot more managerial skill development on both of our parts. So just learning how to better delegate, which is almost impossible for a founder to delegate. You always feel like you can do everything faster, which is probably true, but that's not the way to grow anything. So learning how to delegate and empower people, coaching people, thinking about their individual professional development. This is a job for them at the end of the day, and they're probably not going to end up being with you in the long haul. How can you put them in a better place? So just really thinking about that mindset and finding a mutual way to benefit from each other. So just a lot of that kind of growth, and then setting organizational direction and trying to keep everyone like a conductor, right? Trying to keep everyone at the same cadence and on the same page has been probably the most challenging thing, in addition to catching all the other balls that are falling to the floor because you're not able to hire all the roles that you need. So you're still doing a lot of random things in addition to conducting at the same time.
I know exactly what you're talking about. It becomes a real challenge, but it sounds really interesting. So Justin, we need to finish up now just because we've smacked up against our time allocation. But in terms of what you do and the business that you run, if people were interested in either getting in touch with you or in finding out more about PickFu, where would they go?
LinkedIn is probably the best. You could find me, Justin Chen, PickFu. You'll find my profile. Happy to connect there. I'm pretty active on LinkedIn. If you just want to try PickFu, it's free to create an account. We have a nice guided onboarding, which will let you run a free poll so that you could see what it's like to get responses. And it's very fast. It's within 15 minutes. You'll have real people answering questions about whatever it is that you have questions about. It's very self-service, but we also have a very supportive customer success team that's happy to hop on the call and strategize or train your team on how to use it.
That sounds great. I'll put those in the show notes so that people can basically go there. And it's pickfu.com. So PICKFU.com. That's correct. Okay. Justin, thank you so much for being on the podcast. It's been really interesting.
Great. Thank you, Trudy.